Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great event on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also, at the end of today's webinar, we are going to do a drawing for 6 $25 Amazon gift cards, so please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 6 lucky winners. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is the state of mainframe DevOps. Our speakers today are Sujay Solomon, who is the Chief Z DevOps Advocate for Broadcom's mainframe division, and Mary Johnston Turner, who is the Research VP for Cloud Management at IDC. Welcome to you both. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Charlene.
Well, Sujay, I know you are going to get us started. You've got a great presentation on tap. I'm very excited by this one, so I'm going to put myself on mute and let you get right to it.
All right. So just a little bit more about myself, folks. So as Charlene mentioned, I work for Broadcom. I'm also on the Zoe Leadership Committee. So Zoe is an open source project under Linux Foundation and hosted by the Open Mainframe project, and I'm part of the leadership there. Within Broadcom, I work on DevOps and Open Mainframe closely with product management and bringing new products that, try to fill gaps that exist in the DevOps and mainframe space. With that, Mary, if you'd like to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Sure, and I really appreciate you asking me to join you today. I'm Mary Johnston Turner. I'm Research Vice President for Cloud Management at IDC. For those who don't know IDC, we're a worldwide analyst research firm. We work with a very large cross-section of enterprise IT buyers and users, and looking across really all IT areas. My particular focus is on infrastructure and operations for cloud, container, and DevOps, and I have the opportunity to talk to and survey hundreds and hundreds of enterprise buyers every year. So I'm really excited to share some insights today with you folks.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. Very happy to be presenting with you as well. Okay, so on the agenda today, so first we'll kick off with Mary presenting the IDC study that was done around the state of mainframe DevOps. They've really put a lot of metrics and statistics and perspectives together from leaders across industries and different organizations on where they see DevOps fitting in and what space mainframe sort of occupies there, approaches that have been taken, trends that have shown up in terms of where their priorities are. And from there, I'll be talking a little bit about some of Broadcom's own findings, where we've been working with a lot of customers in helping them marry DevOps and mainframe. We apply a framework called design thinking in actually getting our customers to actually figure out challenges that they have, roadblocks that they might have, risks, barriers, and so on, and figuring out really what the solution can look like in a collaborative manner. So we'll share some findings from that. I'll also share a particular example that really helps with enabling this type of shift-lefted testing that's becoming the norm today. And then we'll open it up for Q&A from there. So with that, Mary, I'll hand it over to you to walk us through the study that you guys did on the state of mainframe DevOps.
Great, well, thanks so much. So before I dive in, let me just take a moment to talk about how we define DevOps for part of this research. We really look at DevOps as development approaches that pair collaborative, agile methods with extensive automation across the development pipelines, testing, infrastructure config and provisioning, security controls, lifecycle integrations for continuous development, delivery. But there's a big cultural and process piece to it too that typically favors short cycles of incremental development, often called sprints, collaborative, team-based decision-making approaches such as Scrum, and they're used to really get everybody from line of business to dev to ops on the same alignment around priorities, acceptance criteria, and rate and pace of change. So during this session, I'm going to be discussing why DevOps is important to mainframe application developments and what our research shows in terms of leaders in this space and what they're doing to ensure that the quality, cost, and availability of mainframe applications keep up with the demands of their customers and industries. I'm hoping that after hearing our research, our listeners can identify specific actions to take back to help their mainframe DevOps organizations develop more effective methods and integrations with the rest of the organization's more distributed application DevOps teams. And if I can get okay. So the research I'm discussing today was sponsored by Broadcom. This spring, we conducted in-depth interviews and a quantitative online survey with decision makers at enterprise scale organizations in the US. These are the folks we talked to were selected specifically because they rely on mainframes to support very important business applications. These organizations have told us that they plan to continue to invest in mainframes and mainframe applications over the next 5 or more years. And they're making efforts to include mainframe applications development teams in their broader DevOps and Agile development initiatives. So just as distributed application developers have turned to Agile and DevOps to speed time to release and improve quality and reduce costs, the mainframe development teams we talked to are finding that there are many benefits around the economics and productivity of mainframe application development. And they're finding that when they actually link these workflows and processes and tools across the organization so that data and processing capabilities that reside in mainframes can be integrated with those on more distributed and web systems, it becomes particularly powerful. What we heard consistently is that organizations that see mainframes as part of their mission-critical business environment, they're proactively working to align developer skills, tools, and processes across DevOps and in alignment with those distributed application teams. We talked to a major publisher who told us that their mainframe environment is definitely strategic. It houses some of the company's most important applications that are used internally and externally by people around the globe. And this organization, this publisher, like many of the folks we talked to, said that they didn't have a compelling business case to re-platform mainframe apps, but they had to make sure that that critical data and workflows were part of their broader environment. We sampled a cross-section of industries, including finance, manufacturing, and healthcare. The folks we talked to represented a range of senior roles across IT ops, DevOps, and line of business, a lot of VP and director, as well as some architects and C-level execs. And, I think the quote we have here really summarizes a lot of what they had to say, which is that they knew if they didn't include mainframes, which is a critical part of their infrastructure, if they didn't include mainframes in their DevOps processes, there'd be consequences. And they said if mainframes are part of the process, you just can't ignore them and develop separately. So that's really what we, the point of view that I think many of the folks we talked to were bringing to the discussion. So let me dig into this a little deeper. As you know, most mature enterprise scale organizations, including governments, not-for-profits, and commercial entities, rely on multiple generations of IT applications and infrastructure technologies. It's very typical to see mainframe, client server, and modern cloud native apps all working together with strategic integrations between modules and workflows. And our research shows that for many established enterprises, these mainframe applications are truly mission critical. I think we certainly saw this on a national scale recently as many governments had to ramp up large unemployment systems and other support systems that was running on mainframes. And if those organizations hadn't been investing all along to keep their development agile and to be able to do upgrades rapidly, they really were struggling to meet this very important public need. So the most proactive organizations we talk to say they recognize that they really do have to keep access and integration and ongoing development agility alive and well across their mainframe-based resources. Even as organizations are migrating or building selected workloads in the cloud or using more modern cloud-native architectures, the mainframes still are very important resources. They really continue to be workhorses for many, many organizations. And, you know, I think what we see is that trying to understand how to evaluate the benefits of making ongoing investments in mainframes and adding mainframes to DevOps is a really important part of the conversation. The kind of KPIs that we see these folks who have recognized the value of mainframe DevOps, what they typically said they emphasize are things around developer productivity, quality, cost, and time to market. In introducing DevOps and Agile development to mainframe app dev teams, they admitted it could be culturally challenging, but as I'll discuss, most of them said it's well worth the effort. Now, the organizations we spoke to, there were a number of common threads. Fully 73% of mainframe DevOps decision makers and influencers told us that they believe mainframe DevOps is critical to the overall success of their organization's digital business and digital transformation strategy. And the line of business decision makers are very engaged. We've seen most of these organizations have been ramping up DevOps capabilities over the last 3, 4, 5 years or more, many times getting started in a more distributed environment, potentially driving end-user facing web capabilities or mobile app development. But as these modern apps have started to take hold and organizations have learned about how useful it is to have a very agile, iterative approach and collaborative approach to development, the mainframes are getting in on the game as well. And so it's not unusual to see mainframes still being that central hub for transaction processing, claims processing, or other kinds of capabilities that really can't be easily or cost effectively replaced in the enterprise. And in many cases, there's not a business case to do so. So when we ask organizations, what are the major application areas where you're focused on mainframe DevOps, it's actually not surprising to see that 63% told us it was big data analytics, 55% said it was online SaaS, online services, 51% said CRM, and then again, a number of different transaction processing and e-commerce kinds of applications, because these are the places where the data and the processing in the mainframe meets things that are already being developed on the front end in a very iterative way. Now, having said that, what we also found is that mainframe teams are typically a bit protective about the critical data running in their systems, and they may have concerns about opening that up to mobile apps or online services. This is often a hurdle, along with a number of other kind of cultural concerns around mainframe apps weren't really meant to change quickly and other concerns. But these are the kinds of things that organizations need to address proactively up front as part of introducing DevOps to their mainframe environment. We found that defining the most important and secure ways to share data, there's still a couple different models out there. Many organizations are using APIs for data access. In some cases, they encapsulate data downloads for testing. Others remain comfortable with the traditional batch processing for data access. I just think it's important that organizations recognize that, yes, you're dealing with very critical data, and therefore it's going to be important to address the lifecycle and protection of that data as part of this transformation. Many organizations told us that they really did need to make an effort to overcome these cultural concerns. And another one, besides all the data things I mentioned, was this idea that mainframe apps were never designed for rapid change. Well, what we found is that organizations who, again, took the plunge, made the investment, told us that it really was worth it, that they were able to increase, 58% of them told us that they could increase mainframe developer productivity. 57% said mainframes are more relevant to the digital business strategy now that they're more integrated. Many said they could improve regulatory compliance, configuration compliance, enhance collaboration and quality, and faster change release cycles. So these themes around productivity, compliance, quality, and speed just came up again and again and again. In many organizations, it wasn't that the mainframe teams exactly duplicated the cadence of a distributed team. Distributed teams might have been working in maybe 2-week sprints or pushing out new code every 2 or 3 weeks. The mainframe teams, typically they would tell us it was more like they were able to move from a quarterly or even annual cycle to more of a monthly cycle. So again, it may not move quite as fast as the most cloud native microservices-based applications out there, but dramatic improvements, which again, lets the organization pivot and update as needed when business conditions change. So sharing consistent tools and workflows and processes across distributed and mainframe teams has proved to be particularly important when it comes to achieving these improvements in efficiency and productivity and reducing costs. 89% of the organizations we talked to said that they're using the same tools and processes across mainframe and distributed DevOps teams. And this is a really important enabler of a successful enterprise-wide DevOps strategy. By simplifying end-to-end workflows, it becomes really beneficial to the entire organization. Training becomes simpler. The mainframe and distributed development teams find it easier to collaborate. They're able to speak the same language and have the same basic approach to planning and testing and deployment. To maximize success, the decision makers we spoke to flagged the importance of being sure that use cases, proof of concepts, automated testing, were similar and consistent so that everyone was on the same page about what the outcomes had to look like. Many noted that taking a collaborative approach to planning and governance is really vital, and that the most successful organizations recommended that both mainframe and DevOps teams participate in centers of excellence and governance to align on shared success metrics that highlight that end-to-end business results. And again, they consistently told us that by going to this same approach to processes, tools, workflows, governance, that was really a secret to enabling the most cost-effective use of resources, simplifying workflows, and generating an environment where there's greater reuse for best practices. So the benefits of these investments are really compelling. We dug deep into our survey data to identify what the best mainframe DevOps performers are doing to accelerate their success. And what we found that there's a top tier set of organizations. They represented about 17% or so of the total sample. And in that top tier, 62% of them have already implemented unified tools and decision-making across mainframe and distributed environments. The rest of the sample, we were around 46%. So they're on the way, but they certainly, the highest performers were much further down the road. Those high performers typically said that they rely on Agile and DevOps approaches for at least 40% of their mainframe development. They said that they've already realized at least a 30% improvement in mainframe development productivity, and they have seen at least a 20% improvement in mainframe development cost savings. So these are pretty compelling points. These successful organizations, have really made an effort to involve the full cross-section of stakeholders, including mainframe and distributed application developers, infrastructure ops, line and business leaders, CTOs, and architects. And many of the leaders have been at work on this for a couple of years. The organizations we polled who are on the way to mainframe DevOps, but were more mainstream. They definitely were seeing the benefits, but not to the same extent that those leaders were. Just looking at it in a little bit more detail, again, that leader, the top tier, they were at a minimum, 62% of them were seeing productivity improvements of at least 30%. Many were seeing improvements of 40%, or more, whereas that mainstream group was, the majority of them were still seeing maybe 30% or less improvement. So some improvement, but not as much. Same kind of experience around cost savings. While the mainstream organizations were typically, 20% cost savings or less, maybe 30. The leaders were, many of them were seeing 30, 40, even 50% cost savings in their mainframe development. And likewise, they were seeing significant improvements in the reduction of defects through the use of automation. So I can share a couple of examples. One large financial institution explained that DevOps is really useful in keeping up with just the ongoing format and runbook changes that occur within the mainframe world. They said that DevOps helped them to standardize and automate end-to-end operational changes and updates and coordinate many smaller changes on a very consistent basis. Again, like I was saying, they really stressed the importance of developing applications holistically, looking at the whole process from beginning to end, and being clear what the role is of mainframe. All help to ensure that those mainframes continue to pull their weight. Looking at are we okay here on the?
Mary, we had lost audio for a little bit. I think the last 20 seconds or so.
You want me to repeat the what I was saying on this slide?
Yeah, if you're able to, I think that'd be helpful.
Okay, sure. So in talking, just to recap, in talking about the benefits of mainframe DevOps, particularly as experienced by those folks in that top tier, what we see is that the top tier typically is going to have 30 or 40% or more improvement in developer productivity, while the mainstream folks are more in maybe a 30% or less sort of scenario. Cost savings, very similar. The mainstream organizations, they've seen some improvement, but often it's 20% or 30%, or lower, whereas the leaders are, very often seeing cost savings on the order of 30%, 40%, even 50%. And similarly, in terms of reducing defects, the leaders are much further ahead in reducing defects through automation and DevOps. And we've had a couple of organizations that really shared some experiences around this. We had a large financial institution that said DevOps has really helped them to standardize and automate end-to-end operational changes and updates and coordinate smaller changes and really do a smooth integration across end-to-end applications that integrate mainframe and distributed processes. We had another one, a regulated enterprise, noted that the reality for them was that they have very large worldwide applications that rely on massive processing power running on their mainframes, and that those are not going to go away anytime soon. They look at these kind of investments in mainframe DevOps as again improving quality, reducing costs, improving developer productivity to make sure that mainframes continue to stay relevant and pull their own weight. So the DevOps tools, the mainframe DevOps tools that are frequently cited as having the most contribution to mainframe development, we actually tested about 15 or 16 different tools, and out of that got and identified the ones on this slide, which included automated testing, integrated development environments, automated code quality analysis, CI/CD and APM, and security analysis, and self-serve provisioning of infrastructure. These are things that typically we're finding, particularly in those leader organizations, and there's usually a pattern. Many organizations get started with implementing IDEs and establishing consistent automated testing capabilities, and then as they mature, they'll add in automated code quality, continuous integration, continuous delivery, APM, and then eventually they'll add in, you know, additional levels of automation and analytics across the infrastructure and app lifecycle. DevOps initially drives faster, more efficient development and test, but over time it also increases the efficiency of deployment into production and enables better monitoring and analytics of code in production. So as I mentioned earlier, challenges do remain. Most often, mainframe DevOps decision makers identify a mix of skills and cultural constraints, and our survey respondents cited challenges with technical integrations across mainframe development and operations, and sometimes a lack of mainframe developer skills or comfort with DevOps programs. Collaboration and communication across distributed and DevOps teams is also cited as a challenge in some cases. Now, the good news is that most organizations are able to successfully overcome these challenges with a mix of training, planning, and advocacy. One of the more important elements of a successful strategy is to treat mainframe developers as equal citizens in the DevOps program. And that includes training them side by side with distributed teams and treating them as equal citizens. Collaboration and trust are critical to the success of broad-based DevOps programs. Often, the successful organizations noted that they were able to identify one or more internal advocates within the mainframe developer ranks. And these individuals generally recognized pretty early on that mastering DevOps approaches, processes, tools, and automation were going to be a net positive, not only for the company, but also for the individual in terms of staying relevant in the industry and in their organization. And these advocates will often take on proof of concept projects or participate in the DevOps centers of excellence and governance. And so their advocacy can be used as sort of a seed to help others on the mainframe teams come around to seeing DevOps as a positive force rather than a threat. Picking well-defined proof of concept initiatives to get started is also important, as is documenting the benefits that result in terms of, you know, time, productivity, quality, cost, and showing that DevOps is truly iterative and collaborative, and really, you know, isolating on the benefits of that collaboration is also very important. Overall, our research shows that many enterprises continue to rely heavily on mainframes to support mission-critical applications and business processes. Mainframes are not going away from many organizations and are expected to continue to be important contributors to overall enterprise digital business strategies. Again, the folks we all talked to said that, you know, 5 years or more, those mainframes are going to be really important. And they tell us they're going to continue to prioritize improving collaborative end-to-end DevOps governance and processes and automation. And they're going to keep making investments in those critical enabling technologies, particularly automated testing, security testing, code quality, CI/CD automation. The lessons learned from looking at the mainframe DevOps leaders is the importance of cultural transformation and collaborative governance going hand in hand with the investment in the tools and the tests and the processes and tools. Together, both the sort of cultural and governance and enabling technology transformations, together they can really increase the visibility and strategic role of mainframes, and again, help with a lot of those core KPIs around cost, quality, speed, and productivity. So this was really an interesting piece of research, and we enjoyed collaborating with Broadcom to bring it to life. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Sujay to talk a little bit about Broadcom's experience in this environment.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for sharing the details as well as some of those nuggets of information about comments made by some of the folks that are at these organizations that you guys interviewed. I think that really gives a lot of perspective into the metrics and statistics that you've shared there. So from Broadcom's perspective, you know, we've seen a lot of the same things. We've been working with customers over the last few years on really helping them marry mainframe and DevOps. And one pattern that I'll share that Mary also mentioned is that there is a recognition amongst leadership, absolutely, that that there is a need for mainframe and DevOps to really integrate well with each other. Whether that has to do with the line of business leaders who own applications and they see the value in being able to go from development into production as quickly as possible without compromising on quality. Or if it's on the IT leadership side, right? You might have folks that are platform specific, maybe on the cloud side, maybe on the mainframe IT side. They are aligned as well. They have, they've got their own goals on the IT side, but they understand that they're supporting a platform which needs to coexist with other platforms in helping deliver applications quickly with quality. And then in addition to line of business and IT, you've also got some of these advocates and champions that Mary was referring to as, these center of excellences for, say, testing or DevOps. And there's agreement there as well that bringing mainframe into the fold is really important. And want to go back to something that Mary had mentioned in one of her earlier slides was a person, there was a quote up there around, if you're moving along with DevOps and you're building, pipelines and automation that really helps you deliver your applications quickly, and mainframe is part of your infrastructure, it's really, it's impossible to leave it out, because if you leave mainframe out of your plans on building DevOps, you're really getting so close to that finish line of being able to get your application updates out. But that last step into crossing the finish line is going to be hard to overcome if you don't have mainframe in the fold. So that's really what we've seen, working with leaders across various organizations that are on similar paths to adopting mainframe into the DevOps fold. However, as Mary mentioned, we've also seen that there's some challenges in terms of actually executing on this. So there's alignment at the leadership level, and there's initiatives that happen that actually drive towards executing on some of these things. But some of the challenges that we've seen are, there's sort of a fear that bringing new processes into the mix can destabilize the applications that have been there, done their job for many, many years. What's the reason to disrupt any of that? So there's a little bit of a fear of change there. There's the complication of shared environments on the mainframe, which is uncommon on other platforms. So there's cases where the same environment could be used for one application's testing and another application's testing, and DevOps really promotes testing often as well as early as possible. So there's complexities involved there that can be some integral challenges that need to be overcome. So many challenges out there. There's some cultural in nature versus some being technical in nature, but there's a lot. Now, one approach that we have taken with a lot of our customers is applying the principle of design thinking in order to overcome some of these challenges that folks might actually identify and come up with solutions that everybody agrees on. Design thinking is actually a framework that originated in the design community, which leads to better products and so on that are defined. However, it can be used to solve many different kinds of problems, especially when it comes to overcoming cross-disciplinary groups and silos that might exist. So, just like any other organization or any other platform, on the mainframe side, we've got development folks, there's testers, QA, there's operations side, there's systems management and IT, and getting everybody in the same room along with their peers on the distributed side and actually collaborating on figuring out what your challenges are, what your roadblocks might be, some risks, or even historical things that people have tried before that may not necessarily have worked. Talking about all of that collaboratively and coming up with ways of overcoming some of that together, can often lead to the best ideas. And that's really what we've been applying with our customers to help them overcome some of these challenges that exist. Now, from these design thinking sessions that we've been running with a lot of our customers, we've been able to identify some patterns when it comes to implementing DevOps and bringing it into the mainframe or bringing mainframe into the DevOps fold. Now, not every organization is the same, but patterns do exist, and this is a common set of adoption approach that we've seen is folks tend to start with some sort of process mapping and tracing where they've got builds that happen on the mainframe, and somebody, maybe a team lead, an architect, tends to approve those changes. Then it goes off into various stages. So that's the earliest stage. And there's a desire to build things like continuous integration or some sort of a pipeline that's able to at least trace where builds are happening and who is approving them. In addition to that, there's also the desire to bring some quality gates into play. Things such as, hey, I'm gonna run my code through code quality scans and get some metrics around the conventions that we're following and the general quality of the code that's getting out of development. So being able to implement some quality gates around that and saying, hey, you've got to be able to conform to a certain level of quality before it can move on is important in the early stages of adoption. Another quality gate metric that I've seen often is also testing, right? So you've got code coverage metrics that you might want to get in there as well. Now, right after that, folks tend to focus on developer experience and actually improving that. And you might ask and wonder, why isn't that number one? Like, shouldn't improving the developer's experience be the first thing? And it's an interesting thing because there's sort of a desire to ease into DevOps on the mainframe side because folks on the mainframe side maybe have not been using DevOps principles and concepts, and you don't necessarily want to change the workflow entirely all in one go. So kind of bringing in DevOps, slowly using some of these process mapping and tracing and maybe building pipeline, then moving into actually changing the way they access source code, perhaps through something like Git, or as Mary was mentioning, bringing in things like IDEs into the fold and just providing some alternatives to the 3270 interfaces that they're used to using, often is the second phase. Third one, and this is an intrinsic part of building DevOps for mainframe, is being able to bring test automation into the fold. Because think about it, the ultimate goal is to produce software that you can get out into production quickly, while keeping quality in place. And the only way that you're able to keep quality and embed quality into your process is by building out automated testing, which a lot of folks start with functional testing being automated. That's the biggest bang for the buck, and it also helps with reducing your QA cycle times, which can be quite long in a lot of mainframe environments. Finally, being able to do continuous delivery where you have full traceability of your binary level artifacts. So, you might have something that's going into a common repository where things that are ready to be deployed into production are stored, but being able to go back and trace, hey, where was my build done? When was it done? And which repository does it map to? Those things become really important at that level. So just absolute full traceability of your artifacts that are generated. Second benefit of that stage is, of course, being able to synchronize your delivery across a lot of platforms. Your application might have components on the mobile side, APIs outside of the mainframe, transactions and so on, database schema changes on the mainframe itself. Being able to synchronize and align all this delivery is a goal of some of the later stages that occur. So given those are some of the phases, we're gonna actually, we've released a new component for something called CA Mat, a product from Broadcom that helps with performance testing. And we're really starting to shift this left. If you look at the distributed side, quite often, all kinds of testing are done at earlier stages with minimal changes. On the dev stage, you might actually do unit testing, functional testing, performance testing, API testing. At the next stage, QA, you might do the same testing. however, possibly with a little bit of a better quality of test data that's maybe closer to what production data might look like. But the important aspect of that is everything is shifted left as much as possible. And the reason that's occurring is that the cost of identifying and fixing a bug in production is just astronomically higher than if you were to find that same bug early on in the development stages. I mean, I've seen metrics around like 1/64 of the cost when it comes to actually fixing it in development in an earlier stage. So on the mainframe side, we're in the early stages of being able to adopt that, and bringing performance testing into an earlier stage is really important in working towards that. And that's what CA-MAT's Zoe CLI extension for detection actually allows you to do. Is as part of your pipeline now, your CI/CD pipeline, you can use the Zoe CLI extension from MAT to really bring performance testing of your batch workload into that automated pipeline. So you're able to establish a baseline for what the performance of your batch application should be, and every time you're building and you're deploying, you're able to automate these tests using this Zoe CLI plugin from MAT, so that you're always comparing yourself to that baseline that was established. And if there's something that's off the scale and it's varying too much from the baseline, that's going to give you an indication very early on that there's something going on here that the development team might need to look at before they even allow this change to move into future stages of their pipeline. So pretty powerful thing here. And this is just an example of what we're building to enable that sort of shift lefting that's happening with DevOps and mainframe. Another extension that we built out over on the right here is again for CA-MAT, but in this case, it's more of an interactive case. Developers are working in IDEs today, things like VS Code, Visual Studio Code, quite popular. And switching context from an IDE to say 3270 can be quite expensive. There's a lot of, in your mind, you're going to have to go from a context that's within an IDE to something else. Now, this extension that we've built out for Zoe CLI called CA-MAT Analyze allows folks to actually, developers to actually stay within the IDE. And when they've gotten a notification that there's some performance issue with their application, they're able to invoke MAT to actually look at the application and at a deeper level discover where these problems might be and a specific portion of their code that might be causing these performance issues. So this one's not necessarily for automated testing or on the pipeline, but it's more so to allow developers to stay within the context of their IDEs. And we've built out a lot of IDEs. You might want to check out something called Code for Z on the VS Code marketplace. And this CLI plugin is really allowing those folks that are using these IDEs to stay within the context of the IDE, even when they've got performance issues and they need to debug that. So I've mentioned things like the design thinking session, a lot of the metrics and data that Mary has shared. We've actually got the IDC info brief posted on our microsite now. This is a brand new microsite that we've launched called mainframe.broadcom.com/DevOps. So if you're able to go there, you will have access to the IDC info brief that has all the metrics and stats that Mary was sharing. In addition to that, if you've got similar challenges around marrying mainframe and DevOps, you've got folks that are working on various disciplines, either on the mainframe side or outside of the mainframe on the distributed side, and you want to work together in a collaborative fashion to really identify what those common challenges are, what the business goals are, and come up with a solution that actually is in agreement with everybody across these disciplines. We are offering, we're taking requests for these design thinking workshops on the same website here today. So with that, I'd like to ask if there's any questions that have come in that we're able to answer.
Absolutely. So yes, we have about 16 minutes to the top of the hour. which gives us a few minutes for a question and answer period. If you have a question for either Sujay or Mary, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. And why don't we go ahead and dive right on into the questions that we do have. Okay, here is the first one. What role is open source tooling having on mainframe DevOps?
All right.
I can start with that, and then I'm sure Sujay has something to add. But open source in general.
Whoops, I think looks like Mary's audio might have cut out again there.
Huh. I'm trying to talk.
Okay, now we can hear you again. Okay. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. So open source has become a real centerpiece of innovation throughout the software industry, and I think many listeners are probably familiar with a significant number of different projects. I think what we're finding is that the mainframe community is getting much more engaged. I think, Sujay, you can tell us more about the programs that Broadcom's involved with, but they create an environment where
Mary, are you here? Okay, Mary, are you still with us? Oh boy. Okay, so Sujay, I don't know if you want to take over.
Sure. So, so the question is the role that open source is playing in DevOps, right? So I'd say I've seen trends where open source is a foundational way that folks are implementing DevOps today, and I've seen stats out there that say the leaders in DevOps tend to use open source tooling a lot more than they use commercial tooling, and there's reasons behind that. One, the fact that it's open source allows the community to really influence the direction of these tools. The licensing often allows organizations to actually take the software and modify it to their specific needs, so they're no longer bound by what a vendor particularly would build. They're able to take the software and make modifications of their own. However, there are challenges to open source, right? It's not for an enterprise to be able to adopt it and rely on it, they often need support for it. So a lot of times there's sort of a marriage in the middle where open source software is highly preferred by DevOps adopters, but they're also looking for some sort of a vendor support that would actually allow them to use it at an enterprise level where they take it, they use it, they rely on it heavily, but if there are mission critical things that are dependent on it, they definitely do prefer to have some sort of a software vendor who's able to provide support for it from what we've seen. Mary, I don't know if your audio is back, if you've got anything to add there. Doesn't look like it. Okay.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on then. Here's a question for you, Sujay. As Matt, M-A-T, I think it's the Moonlight, is a Zoe extension. I assume it's open source and free?
That's a good question. So Matt stands for Mainframe Application Tuner. So the product itself is a commercial product from Broadcom. The extension for Zoe CLI, the Matt extensions that I mentioned for Zoe CLI, they will be freely available for folks who already have CA Matt. So if they're users of CA Mainframe Application Tuner today, these extensions, these Zoe CLI extensions will be available to them just as part of them having a license for using Mainframe Application Tuner. It is not open source, so the extension itself is not open source. However, it is free for anybody who already has a license for Matt.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Next question here. And it'd be great if Mary does rejoin us, maybe she could chime in on this one as well. What is your stance on moving from monolith to microservices?
So I'm
I
not
didn't
sure.
lose you too, Sujay.
No, I'm here. I was just giving a chance for Mary to speak up
Yeah.
if she was, if her audio is
Yeah.
back. Nah, doesn't sound like it. Okay.
Yeah.
So with respect to mainframe specifically, there's a lot of innovations that are happening around that space. IBM has actually allowed traditional transaction managers such as Kix and so on. You're able to start writing your transactions in languages such as Java or Node.js. So, historically, you've had to write them in languages like COBOL or PL1. But the infrastructure and the middleware that's on ZOS today, it supports a lot of the modern languages that folks use today on any other platform. So, I'd say in terms of taking conventional things that are on the mainframe side and making it more, follow microservices paradigms and infrastructures, I would encourage folks to look at taking advantage of some of these languages out there like Node or Java, and if you're taking a look at some of your existing logic that's in some of these transaction processors, it may be worthwhile looking at it and seeing if you're able to follow microservices patterns and convert them from COBOL or any of those languages into, say, Node or Java. On the other hand, there's also things like ZCX, container extensions on ZOS that are looking to allow a container workload to actually run on ZOS that is not necessarily traditional transaction logic that's running in Kix and so on. So different approaches, but yeah, that's definitely a pattern that we've seen is people trying to explore to see if it's possible to bring some microservices patterns into the mainframe side.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, we're about 8 minutes to the top of the hour. I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. Here's one for you, Sujay. How does Zoe impact the 4 phases that you mentioned?
Sure. So Zoe at its core is really a set of programmatic interfaces in addition to other user interfaces, but the programmatic interfaces happen to be APIs, REST APIs that are on ZOS from various services, whether that's the operating system itself or other supporting tooling, things like CA Endeavor is an SCM. We looked at MAT there, or other vendors have tools that run on the mainframe. It offers APIs into all of those services that are running on the mainframe, which really opens the doors for all kinds of automation, right? Now, DevOps does not necessarily equal automation, but automation plays a huge part in being able to achieve that goal of going from development to production as quickly as possible while embedding quality into it. So what we've done in Zoe, in addition to the APIs, is Zoe has a CLI called Zoe CLI, which gives you a command line interface that allows you to script and automate things as you wish using any sort of a language or framework that you'd like. Building Jenkins pipelines and all the common things that folks use on the DevOps side in order to bring as much automation as possible. So in all of those phases, if you had seen, there's a lot of automation involved, and Zoe plays a key role in enabling all of those automation in those phases, in addition to also some user interfaces. So I was talking about, in the second phase, which was developer experience, and in that phase, people use things like IDEs, and Zoe even offers some VS Code extensions, one specifically called Zoe Explorer, that allows you to access data sets and jobs and different resources on the mainframe in a modern IDE context such as VS Code. So APIs, CLI, and VS Code extension and IDE extensions in general, that the role that Zoe plays in those 4 phases that I had mentioned.
Excellent. Okay. Let's see, here is another question. What do you see as mainframe's role in the hybrid IT world? Kind of an open-ended one.
Sure. You know, mobile to mainframe is a reality today. So, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was some conversations and ideas around, is it a cloud versus mainframe world, and then some decisions need to be made. That has really changed. What I notice nowadays is more so everything has its place. Certain workload is good when you're running it on certain platforms. So, for example, mainframes are excellent at batch workload as well as high traffic transactional workload. So, in a hybrid IT world, it's important to treat mainframe as another platform that is specialized for certain types of workload. Now, becoming a part of hybrid IT, however, you need to be able to integrate it into your DevOps platforms and pipelines and delivery in terms of accessibility, offering things like test environments on demand, and all the accessibility issues that are part of cloud platforms need to be brought into the mainframe fold as well. And that's not necessarily a technical challenge. It's more of a, getting over the fact that this is how the platform has operated for 30 plus years, and opening it up and being comfortable with actually opening up the platform through various interfaces so it can become a part of that hybrid IT world that's a reality today. I think that's the challenge, and it's key to be able to overcome that. So overall, I'd say mainframe very much has its place in hybrid IT, and in fact, the hybrid IT reality is partially defined by the fact that there's on-prem things such as OpenShift, which allows you to orchestrate your own infrastructure as if it was a cloud platform, or you've got true cloud platforms like AWS, Google Cloud, and so on. And then you've got on-prem infrastructure such as mainframe, where you've got certain types of workload running. So marrying all of that together, being able to manage that, being able to effectively deliver across all those platforms is sort of the goal of hybrid IT.
All right, great. Well, we are about 3 minutes to the top of the hour, so unfortunately that's all the time for question and answer that we have. Do want to remind folks that there is a great link that we've sent out that includes the IDC info brief. It's still there on your screen, the mainframe.broadcom.com/devops. Lots of information there for you. But I also want to thank everybody for submitting questions. And if we didn't get to your question, I apologize, but please know that the folks at Broadcom will be getting a copy of all the questions. So I'm sure somebody from the organization will be able to follow up with you. Also, wanted to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. We will be sending out an email post-event that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. The webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website, so you can always go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Okay, before we close things out, I did mention at the top of the hour that we would be doing a drawing for 6 $25 Amazon gift cards, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. Our winners today are Aaron F. Congratulations, Aaron. Cliff, let's see, Cliff K. Congratulations, Cliff. Elda L. Congratulations, Elda. Ellen P. Congratulations, Ellen. Mark G. Congratulations, Mark. And final winner today is Rachel B. Congratulations, Rachel. We'll be following up with all of you offline by email to get your gift card over to you, so please be sure to check your inbox. Okay, Mary and Sujay, thank you both for joining today. Great information, lots of good stuff, and judging from the number of questions we got, I know the audience got a lot out of it. So thanks again for your expertise and your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and stay safe.